It's Not a Boy. Chapter 9, Still Waters, Part 3. I'm sitting here on the banks of a dark pond in the corner of our field, because this part of my story tells you of a dark world that I encountered and didn't understand when I was a little girl. We'd seen a courting couple going down our lane, and we all went round to look and see what was happening. But one night I went on my own to watch our courting couple. I found a nice bit of dried grass near another bush halfway down the bank of our drain, and I settled to watch them. And I could hear them talking. "I am so hungry, I just can't help it," I heard the young man say. And I wondered if they'd got some food in there, because that's what Charlie said when he ate my orange. And that's what we told kind Mr. Grey when we wanted some honey from his bees. So I leant a bit further and peered round the bush to see what they'd got to eat. And that's when it happened. I suddenly started to slide down the drain bank. I grabbed out at a little branch on a bush that I was hiding behind, but it snapped off, and then I scrabbled at a tuft of dry grass, and it tore off in my hand. The mud was wet, and there was no foothold at all. I was on a slippery slope, and our drain was there, ready and waiting for me. All it had to do was keep still. Our drain was smooth and quiet on the surface, but underneath its water would take you by surprise because it was very deep. My new wellies reached the water first, and I heard the splash, and then I could feel them being sucked under as they filled with murky, muddy water. In a panic I groped out again for anything, but now there was only fresh air, that good, clean, fresh air that I'd so easily breathed when I was in kind Miss Hart's class. It was no use to me now. I went sliding down with my body pressed on the wet mud. After my wellies filled with water, my belly got sucked in, and I gasped at the cold, and all my innards jumped into my chest in shock. But there was no escape, because next in went my chest. I was out of my depth. Up and up went the water until I retched, and the thick, slimy stuff came on my tongue and in my throat. And still it rose. It thundered into my ears, roaring round and round. I closed my eyes and slid down into the dark, black, murky water. I went down and down, and of course I couldn't swim, and so I knew I must drown. Mud and weeds wrapped round me as I dropped and dropped helplessly. Branches and grasses that I'd grabbed at in vain bent over and stared at me and looked at my death. Then all at once I hit a rock, and my feet felt a solid lump in that slimy, oozy, watery world. And suddenly I knew what to do. I kicked against that rock, and Miss Hart's oranges must have worked and made me strong, because I kicked hard. I fought for all I was worth, even harder than I fought Charlie on my first day at school. I kicked and kicked, and my water-heavy wellies finally floated off. And then suddenly I was going up. I burst above the water and opened my eyes into the blurry light. My mouth opened and I gasped for that delicious fresh air. I was ready to shout help, but I was too late. I was on my way down again. I stuck my arms out and reached up high, but of course there was nothing there except that good fresh air. And it was then that I felt somebody grab my hands and pull, and I was heaved up through the blackness like a baby being born. I gasped and sprawled onto the grass, and when at last my eyes had cleared, that nice young lad who was hungry was leaning over me, while his girlfriend rubbed me down with her coat. And then they ran off back up our lane. It was a long, long time before I could get up and go home. I was very cold and shivering, I can tell you. And when I told Mam what had happened, she was cross at me for losing my new wellies. They cost hard-earned money, she said. Anyway, I had to get washed in our washhouse and then go to bed in case I caught my death of cold. I didn't catch my death, but I did get a cold, and I had to stay in bed and have a day off school. And then when I went back, Brenda told me that Lenny had been in real trouble. You see, news of Charlie's game of lifting girls' skirt at the huts had travelled down to our main school, and the big lads started doing it as well, thinking that it would be fun. And it caused the girls to go round our big playground screaming, and there was lots of mums coming to school to complain. Then the game stopped after a stern word from our headmaster. But yesterday, when I was away, Lenny, who was usually a quiet lad and was Charlie's brother, he usually kept himself to himself. But he suddenly took everybody by surprise, and he jumped out and lifted a girl's skirt. And that would have been all right, because he would just had to be told off by the headmaster. But he didn't stop there. He pulled her knickers down. "Seen your bottom!" he shouted. And it was as if one of Mr. Gray's smoked bees had gone all dozy and wasn't behaving normally. But nobody was making excuses for Lenny's behaviour, of course, and you can imagine what a fuss it caused. Our headmaster got his cane out. I'd seen it before. It was a thin, whippy stick, like Dad took to Hull Livestock Market. Well, Brenda said that Lenny begged and wailed not to be caned, and you could hear his screams all over the big school. He said he was sorry and he would never do it again, and he ran outside, but he was dragged back and caned there and then. But that was not the end of it. You see, Lenny disappeared. He was nowhere to be found. He didn't go home to his little house with the dog on a string that night, and he didn't come to school either. Nobody knew where he was. Except me. I found out where he was. I heard a snuffling noise coming from the courting couple's bush when I went down to our drain again, and I leant over very carefully so as not to fall in, and there in the long grass, cold and shivering, was Lenny. I didn't know what to do. If I told a grown-up, he might be caned again for running away. So I told Terry, and I ran home and made a Sammy, just like I did for our tramp. And I put cheese in it, and I took it back with a cup of water for Lenny. "I run away," said Lenny, as he munched hungrily between sobs, "and I'm never going back. I'm going to hide forever." And he wouldn't budge, but I had to leave him there, and I was worried because it would soon be dark. But I needn't to have worried. When I was supposed to be in bed, you see, I was standing on our windowsill, looking through the bedroom window, and I saw the police. They were in our lane, heading down to Bottom Field with big torches and tracker dogs. And striding out in front was Terry, showing them the way. Of course, Lenny was rescued, and he was carried by a policeman safely home in a blanket. And next morning, when I told the story of Quiet Lenny to my dad, he said again, "The quiet ones are always the worst. Still waters run deep." everything was all right at last. Lenny was forgiven for what he had done because he had been given his punishment by being out in the cold, and everybody was so relieved to see him. And anyway, we soon had something else to think about, because Mrs. Fox, the new Mrs. Fox, was expecting a baby. She already had 4 of Mr. Fox's kids to look after, so I didn't know why she needed another. And I asked Mum, why does she need another? I don't know how she's going to manage, said Mum, in that little house with all those boys and a new baby. Especially after that quiet one has been in trouble. Well, why is she having one? I asked again. She couldn't help it, said Mum. You saw what the courting couple were up to, so you know all about birds and bees. Well, of course I saw them, and of course I knew about birds and bees from Mr. Gray's class. As you know, it was already on my What I Am Good At list. But I didn't see what that had got to do with Mr. and Mrs. Fox's new baby. Mum looked at me carefully, and it was funny, but somehow I knew there was something I didn't know. I was out of my depth again, like when I'd been drowning in our drain. But this time there was no kind young man to grab me and rescue me. And I never could find out from our courting couple what they were really doing that was like my birds and bees. You see, they never came down our lane again.